A loyal dog interrupts his owner's funeral, barking desperately at the closed coffin, but what he reveals leaves everyone speechless. Before watching this true story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to attract 10 years of good luck. In a small town in rural Georgia, where everyone knows each other by name and gossip travels faster than the wind, Emily Johnson runs the Second Chances Shelter, a refuge for abandoned animals that has become a regional reference. At 35 years old, she has dedicated her life to transforming an old mansion inherited from her grandmother into a sanctuary for hundreds of animals. Her most faithful companion is Max, a German shepherd she rescued as a puppy from a flood 7 years ago. The dog developed an almost supernatural connection with Emily, anticipating her needs before she even expressed them. The town's residents used to say that Max had a sixth sense. He could sniff out goodness and evil in people before they revealed themselves. The shelter thrived thanks to generous donations from the community and Emily's tireless work. Every month, a considerable amount of money and supplies were sent by anonymous benefactors through the local charity association, chaired by the respected Mr. Richard Miller, who always showed great interest in the project. One autumn afternoon, while Emily was organizing the shelter's documents in her makeshift office, Max began to act strangely. The dog, normally calm and obedient, wouldn't stop barking at a specific folder on the table. Emily, intrigued by the animal's unusual behavior, examined the papers more closely. "Max, what is it? What are you trying to tell me?" Emily asked, petting the dog's head while flipping through the documents. It was then that she noticed something peculiar. The donation amounts recorded on the official receipts were significantly lower than those announced in the Charity Association's monthly newsletters. That same day, Alex Brown, a young investigative journalist newly arrived in town, visited the shelter for a report on successful social projects. While they were talking, Max remained restless, alternating glances between Emily and the document folders. "Your dog seems to want to tell us something," observed Alex, noticing the animal's insistent behavior. Emily hesitated for a moment, but something in the journalist's sincere look made her trust him. "Alex, I need to show you something," she said, grabbing the documents. "But first you need to understand that this could just be a bookkeeping error." As she explained her findings, Emily had no idea she was about to trigger a series of events that would forever change not only her life, but the entire power structure of the small town. Max, sitting beside her, kept his eyes fixed on the office window, where a familiar figure was discreetly observing them from behind the trees. Mr. Richard Miller, realizing he had been noticed by the dog, quickly retreated, dropping an envelope that contained much more than just accounting documents. Max barked again, louder, as if trying to warn his owner of the approaching danger. "I think we've found something bigger than a simple administrative error," said Alex, analyzing the numbers with professional attention. "If you allow me, I can help investigate this further." Emily looked at Max, who was now calmer, as if he approved of the journalist's offer of help. She knew she was about to dive into deep waters, but with her faithful companion by her side and an unexpected ally, she felt prepared to face whatever came her way. "I accept your help," Emily replied, "but we need to be discreet. Many lives depend on this shelter, and I can't risk losing it." The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, painting the sky in orange hues as Emily, Alex, and Max embarked on a journey that would reveal much more than simple accounting discrepancies. The small town was about to discover that sometimes heroes have 4 legs, and that the truth, no matter how much they try to hide it, always finds a way to come to light. The next morning, the Second Chances shelter was bustling with its usual routine. Emily was distributing food among the animals when she noticed unusual activity at the main gate. Mr. Richard Miller, always impeccable in his grey suit, arrived in his imported car, accompanied by 2 members of the Charity Association. Max, who was helping Emily carry a bag of food in his mouth, immediately went on alert. His fur bristled, and a low growl escaped his throat, behavior he had never shown before with Mr. Miller, who had frequented the shelter for years. "Emily, dear," exclaimed Richard with his characteristic smile, "I came for a surprise routine visit. You know how it is, standard procedures of the association." Emily felt a chill down her spine. In 7 years of the shelter's operation, there had never been a surprise routine visit. Max positioned himself strategically between her and the visitors, maintaining a protective stance. "Of course, Mr. Miller. Make yourselves at home," replied Emily, keeping her composure while exchanging significant glances with Max. As the group toured the facilities, Emily noticed they seemed more interested in the office files than in the animals' welfare. Richard asked specific questions about documentation, donations, and accounting. "Speaking of documentation," said Richard, adjusting his tie, "we'll need to conduct a full audit in the coming days. It's just protocol, you understand, right?" At that moment, Alex, who had arranged to return to continue the investigation, arrived at the shelter. He introduced himself as a journalist interested in doing a story on social projects, without revealing that he already knew Emily. Surprisingly, Max wagged his tail at Alex, which did not go unnoticed by Richard. The businessman frowned, observing the interaction between the dog and the journalist closely. After the visitors left, Emily, Alex, and Max gathered in the office. "They've never done an audit before," whispered Emily, worried. "Why now?" Alex was typing furiously on his laptop. "I found something interesting," he said, turning the screen to Emily. "The Charity Association is involved in various social projects in the region, but they all show the same pattern of discrepancies in the financial reports." Max, who was lying near the door, suddenly got up and began to sniff intensely at one of the file drawers. Emily opened it and found old documents her grandmother had kept about the mansion's property. "My grandmother always said this place held secrets," commented Emily, flipping through the yellowed papers. "She mentioned something about underground tunnels from the coffee plantation era, but we never gave it much importance." Alex examined the old mansion plans. "This explains their sudden interest in the shelter. If there are tunnels, they might be using them for something." Max barked as if confirming the suspicion and ran to the backyard, where he began digging near an old stone structure. Emily and Alex followed him, discovering a small metal entrance buried. "We need to be careful," warned Alex. "If Richard realizes we've discovered something, he might try to accelerate his plans." Emily petted Max, thoughtful. "Tomorrow is Sunday, the day of the charity event at the shelter. Richard always attends with local authorities and the press. It would be a great opportunity to observe his movements." "And I'll be there as a journalist," added Alex. "No one will suspect if I ask a lot of questions." Max barked again, this time softer, alerting them to someone approaching. It was Mary, the shelter's oldest employee, bringing an envelope. "Miss Emily, this just arrived for you. The messenger said it's urgent." Inside the envelope, a single typed sentence: "Not all abandoned animals find a home." Emily, Alex, and Max exchanged glances. The message was clear. Someone knew they were investigating and was trying to intimidate them, but with Max by her side, Emily felt protected. The dog rested his head on her lap, as if to say he wouldn't let anything bad happen to her. The sun was beginning to set and shadows stretched across the shelter's garden. The next day promised to reveal much more than a simple charity event could suggest. Max remained alert, his instincts sharp, sensing that the real battle was just beginning. Sunday dawned with a different buzz at the Second Chances shelter. Volunteers decorated the garden with colorful ribbons, while Emily supervised the final preparations for the annual charity event. Max didn't leave his owner's side, staying more vigilant than usual. The place gradually filled with townspeople, local authorities, and, as expected, Richard Miller arrived accompanied by his usual entourage. He was especially talkative, greeting everyone with his practiced smile, but Max sensed something different in his behavior. Alex moved around the event with his camera, seemingly documenting the event for his report. In reality, he was discreetly recording the suspicious interactions of Richard and his associates. "Ms. Emily," Richard approached, "what a wonderful event. We need to discuss some details of the audit. How about a private moment in your office?" Before Emily could respond, Max stepped between them, not aggressively but definitely protectively. Alex, noticing the tension, approached with his notepad. "Mr. Miller, how timely to find you. Could you grant me an interview about your work at the Charity Association?" The businessman hesitated, visibly annoyed by the interruption. "Perhaps later, young man. I have urgent matters to discuss with Emily." At that moment, Mary, the old employee, approached hurriedly. "Miss Emily, there's a problem with the puppies in the quarantine area." Emily took the opportunity to excuse herself, following Mary with Max in tow. When they reached the reserved area, Mary quickly closed the door. "There's no problem with the puppies," she whispered. But I overheard a very strange conversation. Two men from the association were talking about cleaning up evidence today, taking advantage of the event's confusion. Max barked softly, running towards the back of the shelter. Emily and Mary followed him, finding Alex already waiting for them near the tunnel entrance discovered the previous day. "We need to investigate now," said Alex. "With everyone distracted by the event, it's our best chance." Emily hesitated. "I can't just disappear from the party, they'll notice my absence." "I'll take care of it," offered Mary. "I can say you're dealing with an emergency with a sick animal. No one will question it." Max was already sniffing the tunnel entrance, clearly eager to explore. Emily realized they wouldn't have another perfect opportunity like this. "Mary, keep Richard occupied. Alex, do you have a flashlight in your camera equipment?" Alex nodded, pulling a powerful flashlight from his bag. With Max leading the way, they carefully removed the metal cover and began descending an old ladder. The tunnel was surprisingly well preserved, with reinforced walls and even some recently installed lights. Max followed determinedly, as if he knew the way. "Someone has been using this place a lot," observed Alex, discreetly photographing some details. After a few minutes of walking, they arrived at a larger area clearly used as a storage space. Stacked boxes contained documents and what appeared to be financial records. "This is much bigger than we imagined," whispered Emily, examining the papers. "These are records of various social projects in the region, all with irregularities." Max suddenly became tense, his ears alert. Seconds later, they heard voices approaching through the tunnel. Emily, Alex, and Max quickly hid behind some boxes. "It has to be today," said a voice they recognized as Richard's. "That journalist is asking too many questions, and that damn dog, that animal senses things it shouldn't." Emily hugged Max, keeping him quiet. Her heart was pounding as the voices came closer and closer to their hiding spot. Alex, with silent movements, continued to take photos. The sound of footsteps echoed through the tunnel, approaching dangerously. Max remained impressively quiet, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. At any moment they could be discovered. The footsteps and voices grew closer in the tunnel. Emily, Alex, and Max remained motionless in their hiding spot, breathing as quietly as possible. Emily's heart was pounding so hard she feared it might be heard. "We need to transfer all of this today," continued Richard, his voice echoing through the tunnel walls. "That woman and her dog are too close to discovering everything. Years of work could go down the drain." At that moment, one of Richard's associates' cell phone rang, making them stop abruptly just a few feet from the hiding spot. "Yes? What do you mean a surprise inspection? Who authorized it?" The man's agitated voice reverberated in the enclosed space. "We're heading back immediately." The footsteps began to retreat hastily, and soon the voices faded in the direction of the exit. Emily exhaled the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Mary must have found a way to create this distraction," whispered Alex, already standing, quickly photographing the boxes around them. Max was sniffing the scattered documents, barking softly when he found a specific folder. Emily opened it, revealing falsified contracts and receipts. "Look at this," she pointed out. "It's not just embezzlement from the shelter. There are documents from several social projects in the region. Orphanages, nursing homes, community centers." Alex examined the papers with a professional eye. They created an entire network of resource diversion. The money that should go to social causes is being... A metallic noise interrupted his speech. Max immediately went on alert, looking towards a side passage they hadn't noticed before. "There's someone else here," whispered Emily. From the side corridor emerged a familiar figure, Mrs. Bertha, the City Hall secretary, carrying a folder full of documents. Upon seeing Emily, she dropped the papers, scattering them on the floor. "Emily? What? How?" stammered the woman, visibly nervous. "Mrs. Bertha, are you involved in this?" asked Emily, incredulously. The secretary began to cry. "It's not what you think. They forced me to participate. I have proof of everything, but they threatened my family if I spoke up." Max approached the woman, sniffing her cautiously before wagging his tail as if confirming her sincerity. "That's why I always found it strange how the City Hall documents mysteriously disappeared," said Alex, beginning to piece together the puzzle. "We need to get you and these proofs out of here," decided Emily. "But first tell me, how long has this been going on?" "Years," replied Mrs. Bertha, wiping her tears. Richard built a perfect scheme. He uses these tunnels to hide documents and move money without raising suspicion. No one would suspect social projects. A distant sound of voices returning made everyone freeze. "Quick," whispered Alex. "Is there another exit here?" "Mrs. Bertha nodded, pointing to the side corridor. "It leads to an abandoned warehouse 2 blocks from here." Max was already moving, leading the way. Emily helped Mrs. Bertha gather the most important documents, while Alex captured as much as he could with his camera. "Tomorrow is the municipal council meeting," informed Mrs. Bertha as they hurried through the tunnel. "Richard will present a project to take full control of the city's social resources. Then we have until tomorrow to organize all these proofs," concluded Emily. The group emerged in a dusty warehouse, the afternoon sun streaming through cracks in the walls. Max remained alert, ensuring no one had followed them. "I can't go back home," said Mrs. Bertha, trembling. "They'll know it was me." Emily exchanged glances with Alex before deciding, "You'll come to the shelter with us. There we can organize everything safely. Max would never let anything happen to any of us." The dog barked in agreement, as if understanding every word. The group discreetly left the warehouse, blending in with the city's movement. The race against time had begun, and the fate of the entire community depended on what they would do in the next few hours. The sun had already set when the group arrived at the shelter. Mary was anxiously waiting for them at the back gate, keeping an eye out for any suspicious activity. The charity event had ended a little while ago, leaving only remnants of the day's excitement. "Richard was looking for you everywhere," whispered Mary, guiding everyone inside. "I managed to throw him off by saying you were dealing with a veterinary emergency in the neighboring town." Max led the way, checking each room before allowing the group to proceed. Emily turned the veterinary treatment room into an improvised headquarters, where they began organizing the documents. "We need to digitize all of this," said Alex, turning on his laptop. "The more copies we have, the safer we'll be." Mrs. Bertha, still trembling but calmer, began explaining the scheme's extent. "Richard doesn't act alone. There are important people involved, including—" A loud knock on the front door interrupted her speech. Max immediately went on alert, growling low. "Emily!" "I know you're in there," Richard's voice echoed down the hallway. "We need to talk about the audit now." Mary quickly led Mrs. Bertha to a safe room while Alex hid the documents. Emily took a deep breath, signaled for Max to calm down, and went to answer the door. "Mr. Miller, what a surprise," she said, keeping the door slightly ajar. "It's past 9 at night. Where were you during the event? And why is that journalist still snooping around here?" Richard tried to peer over Emily's shoulder. Max stood beside his owner, staring at Richard with a piercing look that made the man step back. "I had an emergency with an animal," replied Emily calmly. "And the journalist is doing his job documenting successful social projects. Isn't that what we want?" Richard adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. "Tomorrow at the council meeting I will present significant changes in the management of social projects. I hope to count on your support." "Of course," replied Emily, maintaining eye contact. "I'll be there." After Richard left, the group reconvened. Alex had already digitized part of the documents, sending copies to secure servers. "He's suspicious," observed Mary. "I've never seen him so nervous." Mrs. Bertha picked up a specific folder. "Here is the project he will present tomorrow. He wants to centralize all the city's social resources into a single institution, controlled by him, of course." Emily was flipping through the documents when Max began barking insistently at one of the windows. Alex quickly turned off the lights, and they all saw shadows moving in the garden. "They're watching the shelter," whispered Emily. "There's a way out through the back, through the kennel," remembered Mary. "We can use the animal transport van to get Mrs. Bertha out of here." Max barked softly, as if approving the plan. Emily grabbed the van keys while Alex organized the most important documents in his backpack. "I'll take her to a safe place," offered Alex. "I know people who can protect her until tomorrow." "And me?" asked Emily. "How will I get to the council meeting with them watching me?" Max touched his nose to her hand, as he always did when he had an idea. He walked to the area where they kept the staff uniforms and pulled one out with his teeth. "Of course," exclaimed Mary. "I can leave with Max for the dog's nightly walk, as I always do. Emily can leave disguised as an assistant, taking other dogs." The plan was beginning to take shape. While Alex and Mrs. Bertha prepared to leave through the back, Emily and Mary organized the details for the next day. "The meeting starts at 9, said Mrs. Bertha before leaving. Richard always arrives half an hour early to prepare his presentations. Max remained alert, monitoring every movement outside the shelter. The group knew that the next few hours would be crucial. It wasn't just the future of the shelter at stake, but the fate of all the social projects in the town. The day had barely dawned when Emily, dressed in the simple uniform of a shelter worker, began the preparations. Max, more attentive than ever, watched every movement at the gate through the kitchen window, where Mary was preparing breakfast. The men who were watching left an hour ago, informed Mary, serving a cup of coffee to Emily. They probably went to prepare for the council meeting. Emily checked her phone again. Alex had sent a message confirming that Mrs. Bertha was safe and that the digitized documents were secured in 3 different servers. 8:15, murmured Emily, checking the clock. It's time. Mary grabbed the leashes of 5 dogs from the shelter, including Max. It was common for the staff to take the animals for morning walks, and no one would suspect another routine walk. Remember, said Mary, adjusting the cap on Emily's head to better hide her face, you're just another volunteer walking the dogs. I'll go out first with Max and 2 others. You follow 5 minutes later with the rest. Max barked softly, as if reviewing the plan. Emily hugged her faithful companion before he left with Mary. As she waited for her turn to leave, Emily received a message from Alex. I'm positioned at the City Hall. Richard just arrived with 3 men. They brought several folders. Exactly 5 minutes later, Emily left with the other dogs. She walked calmly through the town's streets, as any shelter worker would. Some people greeted her without recognizing her, proving that the disguise was working. As she approached the City Hall, she saw Mary and Max sitting on a bench in the square. Max immediately identified her arrival, but remained disciplined, showing no recognition. Alex appeared at the City Hall door, pretending to take some photos of the historic building. It was the agreed signal that everything was ready. Now it's up to you, whispered Mary, taking the leashes of the other dogs. Max knows what to do. Emily walked determinedly towards the City Hall entrance, with Max by her side. The security guard at the door stopped her. The council meeting is closed, Mum. I'm Emily Johnson from the Second Chances shelter. I'm on the participant list. The guard checked his clipboard, surprised to recognize her without her usual blazer and high heels. Sorry, but animals are not allowed. Max is a guide dog in training, intervened Alex, approaching with his press badge. By Municipal Law 1.247, he has free access to all public buildings. The guard, caught off guard by the legal citation, allowed them to enter. In the corridor leading to the council room, Emily and Max met Mrs. Bertha, who was nervously waiting for them. Richard is presenting efficiency graphs of the centralized management, she whispered. It's all manipulated. Max, suddenly, turned his head towards a slightly open side door. Through the crack, they could see Richard and his associates hurriedly organizing papers. They brought the original documents, realized Emily. They want to approve everything today and destroy the evidence afterward. Alex positioned himself strategically with his camera. When you go in, I'll start the live broadcast for the local newspaper. They won't be able to stop it. Emily took a deep breath, arranged the documents in her folder, and petted Max. The decisive moment had arrived. Through the massive wooden doors, she could hear Richard's confident voice presenting his project. Let's go, Max, she whispered to her faithful companion. Time to show the truth. The dog remained firm by her side, ready to face whatever came their way. Together they walked towards the council room, where the future of the entire community would be decided in the next few minutes. The council room doors opened, and all heads turned towards Emily and Max. Richard, in the middle of his presentation, stopped abruptly upon seeing them. For a moment, silence filled the room. "Ladies and gentlemen of the council," began Emily, her firm voice echoing through the room. "I apologize for the interruption, but there are crucial facts that need to be considered before any vote." Max sat elegantly by her side, his attentive eyes fixed on Richard, who began to show signs of nervousness. "This is outrageous," protested Richard. "We cannot allow animals in this meeting, and Ms. Johnson is not on the agenda." "According to the council's internal regulations," interrupted Alex, who was filming everything from the door, "any citizen can request to speak when it concerns public interest." The council president, Dr. Martha Smith, adjusted her glasses. "The floor is granted to Ms. Johnson. You have 10 minutes. Emily began distributing folders to the council members. What you have in your hands are proofs of a systematic scheme of resource diversion from all the town's social projects. Richard stood up abruptly. This is defamation. I will sue. Max emitted a low growl, making Richard instinctively step back. Alex continued filming, capturing every reaction. The documents show, continued Emily, how the funds intended not only for the shelter, but for all social projects have been manipulated over the years. Mrs. Bertha entered the room carrying more documents. As the City Hall secretary, I can attest to the authenticity of each paper. I have the original records here. The room buzzed with whispers. Council members flipped through the documents with expressions of shock and indignation. Richard, seeing his plan fall apart, tried one last move. This is a conspiracy. These people want to destroy all the social work we've built. And you're going to believe a woman who spends her days talking to animals. Max, as if understanding every word, stood up and walked to a folder Richard had left on the table. Delicately, he picked it up with his teeth and brought it to the council president. The real documents are here, said Emily. Mr. Miller brought them to destroy after the vote. Compare the signatures, the amounts, the dates. Dr. Martha examined the papers with professional attention. Her face showed growing concern as she compared the documents. This is very serious, she finally declared. Secretary, please immediately convene the ethics committee. Richard, realizing he was cornered, tried to run for the door, but Max was already there, blocking the way without showing aggression, only determination. It's over, Richard, said Emily softly. The truth always finds its way. Alex, still filming, smiled. And it's all being broadcast live. The whole town is watching. The council president suspended the meeting and called for an extraordinary session to review the complaints. As the council members left, many stopped to congratulate Emily and even pet Max. You saved much more than the shelter today, said Mrs. Bertha emotionally. You saved the dignity of our entire town. Max wagged his tail, receiving the thanks as if he understood his role in the whole story perfectly. Emily knelt and hugged him, letting a few tears of relief fall on his fur. Let's go home, she whispered to her faithful companion. We still have many animals to care for. As they left the city hall, a small crowd had already gathered in the square applauding. The news had spread quickly, and people were beginning to understand the true extent of what had happened that morning. Max walked proudly beside Emily, as he always had, as he always would. He was more than a hero dog. He was living proof that loyalty, love and truth always prevail. 3 months had passed since that historic morning at the City Hall. The Second Chances shelter was unrecognizable, now with renovated and expanded facilities, thanks to the proper application of the recovered funds. It was a sunny Sunday afternoon, and the shelter was holding its first adoption fair after the restructuring. The garden was filled with families interested in giving a home to the animals, while volunteers guided them on responsible adoption. Max supervised everything from his favorite spot under the old oak tree, where he could have a privileged view of the entire grounds. Beside him, Emily was organizing the final details of a special surprise. Is everything ready for the inauguration? Asked Alex, who, besides becoming a close friend, now coordinated the shelter's communication department. Almost, replied Emily, adjusting a colorful banner. I still can't believe we managed to realize this dream so quickly. The dream in question was the new Rehabilitation and Training Center, a space dedicated to preparing dogs to serve as emotional support in hospitals, nursing homes and schools. The idea had come after Max's story became known, inspiring people to recognize the therapeutic potential of animals. Mary approached with a group of special visitors, children from the local orphanage, now properly assisted with the recovered resources. Max immediately stood up, gently going to greet the young visitors. Is he really the hero dog? Asked one of the children, enchanted. Yes, smiled Emily. But do you know what his true superpower is? Love. Max taught us that when we truly love, we find strengths we didn't even know we had. Mrs. Bertha, who now chaired the new Social Projects Transparency Council, arrived bringing more good news. The City Hall approved the expansion project, she announced, beaming. We'll be able to build shelter units in other towns in the region. Max wagged his tail, as if understanding that his legacy would extend beyond the shelter's walls. Emily couldn't hold back tears of joy, seeing her faithful companion interacting with the children, showing the same kindness and patience as always. Attention everyone, called Alex. It's time for the official inauguration of the Max Rehabilitation and Training Center, A Hero's Love. The plaque was unveiled to applause. Max sat elegantly beside the image depicting him, as if posing for photos. "This center," Emily said in her speech, "is not just a memorial to what happened. It's a commitment to the future. Here we will train dogs to bring love and support to those who need it most, following the example of our Max." The children from the orphanage were the first to enter the new space, where they found puppies already in training, ready to begin their journey as emotional support dogs. "Every animal has a special gift," Emily explained to the little ones. "Just as Max discovered his, we help each of these dogs find their vocation to help others." The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with orange hues. Families left not only with new furry members, but also with a lesson about love, loyalty, and perseverance. Max watched everything with his wise eyes, now lying next to the puppies who would be the next heroes of the shelter. Emily sat beside him as she did every evening. "You know, Max," she whispered, "you didn't just save the shelter. You taught us that real heroes don't need capes or superpowers. They just need a heart full of love and the courage to make a difference." The dog rested his head on Emily's shoulder, his characteristic gesture of affection. On the horizon, a new chapter was beginning to be written in the history of the Second Chances shelter, now a beacon of hope and transformation for the entire community. And Max, the four-legged hero, would continue there, the silent guardian of dreams and tireless protector of that place where second chances turned into love stories.